Yes, possibly to spawn their shirt.
Oh. Oh my god. We
It is always pretty funny.
I feel like this is a ripe opportunity for a signature Jason Morningstar fun to fail experience. So when we had the opening party at from 7 to 8, or from yeah 7 to 8, we had a like avatar warm up session, and Stephanie managed to uh, get bag stuck on herself and then removed it and took off all her clothes. So she was in the sandbox just buck naked, and then we had to step.
Oh my god. God. Wow. Yeah. It's surprisingly hard to sit. I keep trying to. I want to sit on this bench.
Are you on a Mac or PC?
I'm on a Mac.
So I think it's Command click is the equivalent to right click.
Oh,
If
command click.
if,
Yeah,
if
I
anybody
don't
says
have
right
this
click,
button mouse. I just don't seem to be able to sit on the bench. I can only sit in front of
no,
the
no,
bench.
you can't because it doesn't have any on bench seating poses.
Oh.
Oh,
Ah. Yeah.
Look, there you go. That works.
There we go.
I can't even see myself. So
There we go. I'm just here with my guitar, which I totally know how to play.
but see, this is another thing that's great. Like, you know how in the Matrix people just download things into their brain, like how to ride a helicopter and stuff. You can kind of do that here. Like, you objects have instructions how to use them inside of them. So I have an accordion which plays all kinds of funny tunes.
I absolutely
Oh.
love, I absolutely love our pianos that we have, and other various things.
Well,
I
let's
don't know if
play.
you ever saw that Office episode where Pam says to Jim in Second Life, "You're a sports writer from Detroit and you play the guitar. I didn't know you played the guitar." And it's hilarious.
Hey, can you guys help me with something? We're gonna play a little game. It's called Avatar, Invisible Avatar, and it works like this. You tell me what to do in order to stop being sunken into the ground.
Okay, you.
No, I know how to do that. I just want you to tell me the position. Do I need to go up?
Oh, you look like you're sitting in front of the bench.
Okay, but
Yeah.
My-
Click on the vent
okay,
and
how's that?
adjust. Yeah, and then it should. This is
No,
always so
I,
fun.
no, I know how to adjust it. I just can't see myself, so I need other people to tell me when I'm unburied.
You look like a person.
Yeah, you look pretty perfect. One foot is sinking into the ground, but that's it.
I'm not going to worry about that right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it. You look perfect.
You look like yourself too. And
Thank you.
Jason, your new clothes have you looking
Jason,
like yourself.
yeah,
Oh,
Jason def.
I'm sorry. It's
Well,
yeah, I think this. Yeah.
see, Lizzie, the funny thing about it is, my other avatar, my 1920s avatar, I have basically over time come to look more and more like her in real life. So this avatar,
Fashion inspo.
well,
It turns out this is Celia's research that I am
it's
constantly citing. That people with avatars have been shown to there's a benefit to having an idealized self because over time people come to look more like their virtual selves or their idealized selves. I've always said that Second Life is like a board. Now I say it's like a Pinterest because Pinterest has replaced Pinboards. A vision board.
oh, Janet, hi, how are you? I'm so happy you came.
I'm like so confused about how this works, but I've managed to get this far. I could not figure out how to customize anything, and my computer hates it.
I would say 0 to 30.
Love that. I 100% cannot find the front again. That is never going to happen.
So for the
Hey. Okay.
Get lost.
session last night, which Ted was also in, and they kept saying, "Well, normally you do this standing in a circle," and I was like, "Well, we should try that."
How'd that work?
I had a great time. I mean, I find that getting people, at least from a theater background, over the hump of letting go of physical embodiment is almost impossible. So, like the theater people that I've dealt with, for the most part, just they don't want to give up corporal embodiment as their center of. It's really it's much deeper than just like a bias. It's like an epistemological frame because like all the theater people that I've hung out with, like when I went and hung out with Punch Drunk in the UK, and all the people I've hung out with at Northeastern, and everything starts with embodiment. Like they start everything with their bodies, and I think it's very interesting to think about creating a virtual body and how. I mean, I think everybody here, by definition, is somebody that has been doing some kind of experimentation, right, with a distributed body experience of some kind.
Oh, I just realized this was muted the whole time. That's pretty funny. Sorry about that, everyone. We're about to get started.
Yes. So, yeah, let's start. I mean, maybe other people will want to do, but Lizzie and Jason are award winning. I changed the description because I was like, you guys won festival. That's kind of a big deal.
I believe Celia said you are, quote, LARP luminaries, which is very alliterative, which is always satisfying.
And it is totally, and it is not inaccurate. So, people probably are familiar. If you've read the book, Leaving Mundania, then you know Lizzie's, some of Lizzie's older work of art, but recent. G and Jason just won Festival Scenario Award, which I believe they're the first Americans to have won. Is that true? Oh, wow.
Wow!
And then, if you don't know Jason, you probably know his game Fiasco.
Yes, I have the Fiasco books
And they're just
on my
doing
shelf.
a warm-up exercise right now where they're trying to sit down. It's funny. It's fine. It's a big experiment. It's just a big experiment. So, what they were going to try to do is see if they can play around a little bit in this space and think about how we could translate LARPing into a virtual world. So, I'm going to hand it over to them.
But it's maybe a good way to talk about mixing desks or design tool and how it could be applied in virtual spaces like this. And maybe thinking about each of the points and sort of where the logical affordances are. Seem like a good, still like a good plan?
Yes.
What-
Yeah, our deal is we don't know a ton about Second Life, and so we wanted to just explore some of the affordances of the space and think about like what kind of LARP knowledge ports over and what kind of LARP knowledge doesn't.
So there's
Is
this
that
tool.
about right, Jason?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds absolutely on board. So there's this tool that was originally developed by Martin Anderson and Martin Nielsen called the Mixing Desk of LARP. And it's a way to think about design by imagining the design process as a series of faders that you move up and down. It's not a way to categorize LARPs. It's not a way to quantify them. But as a design tool, it's really useful. And because we don't know much about how you do this in a space like this, we're hoping that we can kind of go through each of these faders with the understanding that you can remove ones that don't make sense and add others as you need them. But I think going forward, that sound good?
That sounds great.
Huzzah!
All right.
All right. So the first fader is openness, and this is really about well, it takes from transparency to secrecy. So in a transparent game, like we share all information among us. You know, my character and your character are having a big a fight about that big secret. Maybe we decide what the big secret was beforehand, so we can have a more theatrical kind of fight. So in a fully transparent game, when the fader is all the way up at transparency, there are no secrets. Secrecy is the other extreme, and that is when you keep secrets for the players. You know, like the zombie attack will happen at 7 p.m.
Does that include whether players are keeping secrets from each other, like partial information and stuff like that?
Yeah, quite often, and the sort of 50% depending on the degree of secrecy or the
But I think there's also some interesting ways to think about it. Again, in terms of affordances, like, um, so in my game taxonomy, one of the things I have is information, and I talk about information revealed and concealed, and also information that changes its status during the
Right.
course of a game. So, like in a card game, whether your hand is visible only to you, or whether some of the cards in your hand are visible to
Right.
other people, you know.
Knowledge is one more piece of the player inventory.
So, in a software supported environment like this, you can actually algorithmically reveal and conceal information. Like you can have a situation like where you don't a certain set of conditions have to be met before certain information is revealed. I mean, there's a way to write scripting that does that.
Right. There's everything here from we have the ability to have private chats. So, for example, whoever's running the event could be messaging the players individually with due details or actions.
Yeah, thank you. So to Jason's point, it's very much also social contract aspect. There are multiple myriad RP sims or islands here in Second Life, and it's kind of dealer's choice, right? It's up to them and the collaborators themselves whether they're going to sort of script that together and kind of have that omniscience while they play things out versus whether they're going to be concealing things from one another. And it just entirely depends on like which cyberpunk or vampires and you happen to visit join. There are really elaborate worlds. I think there's a Final Fantasy sim. Like if you don't want to be playing Final Fantasy online, you can go to virtual Final Fantasy sim in Second Life and RP there. I want to say there's a RP for them, and there are some really long-running post-Ikai sims. They are all different.
And
I
or
believe to join them,
Absolutely.
create a character and turn it in, and you're basically entering a social contract when you do that.
That's super interesting, and it's a good segue into the next fader, which is scenography or environment. I think actually is very relevant here, and it's relevant to what you were just saying, Jen, because the fader runs from 360 illusion, where what you see is exactly what you get, to minimalism, where we're all agreed so like we're in an extremely minimalist take on the environment, we're all going to agree that we're elves in a fantasy world, even though our avatars don't change, and we're still around the corner. I'm not sure we can do that. The person that would probably be some of those islands you're describing, where the detail is high, and the illusions. And do you see that as well? I guess that's my question for you. Are there places where people aren't aspiring toward extreme levels of realistic detail?
there's all
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, there's all kinds of styles. There's a whole cartoon style. There's like furries and people that kind of want to live in a Disney cartoon. There's also artists and dance companies that do super abstract stuff. I mean, there's a real wide range of affordances and opportunities there.
Right. When Evan was here, I know he talked about something called black box larping. It sounded a lot like the type of abstract collaborative theater that you're talking about, where you all agree that something is happening, even if the environment doesn't necessarily support that. I think Second Life tends towards the other extreme just because there is so much
Right, as opposed to, sorry.
Well, I think it varies. I mean, I've been in a community that's been around for, I think we just celebrated 10 years. And it's become more and more real and immersive by virtue of the fact that people have learned the craft, right? I mean, she always wanted to make something that was a simulation of a historical period, so fidelity is kind of her hallmark. But when she started, she didn't really have the skills to pull it off, and now she does. So
This is an amazing sim, by the way, that Celia is describing.
Berlin.
It's, you are not allowed to visit unless you are already dressed period appropriately.
And they have clothing for you at the entrance.
To do it, yeah, at the entrance before you can come in, and it's one of the most fascinating.
yeah, it's a historical role playing.
It is interesting. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ted.
It is interesting that some of the larger. I remember Jen took me on a tour of cyberpunk RP sims, and most of them have affordances for people that are just visiting, as opposed to people that are participating or even who set their homes in these spaces, so that
You put on a tag,
exactly you put on a tag that says you're a visitor,
talk to RP with you.
right? And then some of them have even reinforced behaviors with HUDs, so that, when you have the HUD equipped, if you try to equip something that's not in the list of approved items, like you can't enter the space. If you start flying, that's fine, but like the game will end, any points that are being tracked end, any stats end, because you're breaking the rules, and you're now out of the RP for that time. You're out of character, literally, as enforced by a script running on the server. So it's very interesting how that works.
In the more
Sorry.
gamey role playing, like I was in a pirate community, so that's my ship over there, that gigantic pirate ship. I lived in that for about 5 or 6 years, and part of that time I was in a pirate role playing community, and we had a combat system that has actually become a standard across all of Second Life that has both sword fighting and a gun and cannon conventions that everyone shares. So there's a cannon over there that you can actually shoot. And if you play in those kind of role playing sims, especially if there's combat, then you use a HUD that captures damage. So you can kind of proceduralize the boffer LARP kind of mechanic in a space like this.
Or you can also just agree and do it all verbally or over text. It really supports a wide range. It supports
Yeah,
quite a bit.
kind of an interesting question. What is games by 360-degree illusion versus minimalism in this world too? I mean, obviously looking games from a really cool set is a feeling of entering another reality.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons we use minimalism in the real world, meat space world, is that it's easier to execute, and it makes the prep time less. And sometimes you get something a little different out of the symbolic object. It's more about the way somebody hands you the pencil and tells you it's a bouquet of flowers than it is about the actual object of the flowers. And so I'm wondering if, because we're already here in a world that's non-representational in the sense that, I'm not holding a guitar in my house right now as I sit here. I wonder if that may be not some of what makes the scenography feel more essential.
I
I didn't have a bouquet of flowers, but I just gave you a potted flower.
I was just going to say that when we sort of had the tour yesterday, my first thought was it must be pretty fun to spend the energy and time to get totally kitted out in a virtual environment that's totally accurate for whatever you're playing, but that the opportunity cost and the sort of the barriers to executing it seem really high to me compared
Well, I think the thing with Second Life is, like many things, it's easy once you know how to do it. And so, in a case like that, I would say if I was going to create a LARP experience that had elaborate scenography, I would probably want to work with someone who's a better B, because I don't really know how to. I know how to decorate. So, like Jason, one of the things you can do here that makes it really great is if I want to make a set for a play, for instance, I have a dance troupe, right? So my partner who does all the sets, he builds most of her buying things and assembling them. She doesn't make, she makes a few things, but most of the things she puts together into our sets.
I think there's kind of a sliding scale where, to build a really deeply immersive space, that takes some doing. It's a lot of either construction, a lot of modification of objects, a lot of collection and curation of objects, and then of course the assembly and placement, making sure everything's hooked up and works properly. And then the other extreme, which is like we're just going to do a minimalist experience that's purely verbal. But there's kind of this in between space that in Second Life is a lot easier, which is, you know, to throw together something that is like passably believable. And when you think about some of the things that folks do in real life that are quick setup and quick breakdown, like you might have like a few tents, so you might have maybe someone puts up a cardboard wall and like labels the location. You can do that in Second Life, basically zero effort at a relatively high level of quality. And while it's not going to be, a truly 360 immersive experience, it's much more, it's much further along than that kind of just material independent, because you can create anywhere. You can create anything anywhere, with some pretty simple tools. Once you get past that initial learning curve.
Maybe we should move to the next later. I think it's cool that I think it's cool that you can just kind of throw something up that's symbolic with labels. Like that to me feels very practical for the kind of new, at least the new technique facilitator. But I think we should move to runtime direction because I'm very curious about this.
Yeah, me too.
Runtime direction goes from active user to end facilitator. Of course, you can do that. But so active or passive facilitation is, I set up the characters, we press go, and then everybody starts LARPing, and then at the end of the experience, the organizers press stop. Um, but don't have a lot of input. In on the other extreme, very active facilitation, in meat space, it might include the facilitator, physically manipulating other people, like pushing down on their shoulders to make them feel more sorrowful or more constrained, whispering things into their ear, but in a way that everybody can understand. I'm sorry, the toddler has just wandered in here.
Hello. Hello.
Actually, tell people to do a scene again. It's a very common, heavy, active runtime direction technique. And there are games that are designed around that. A game called Radiant Autumn, where anytime conflict arises, the game master is specifically told to start the scene over. Because that's what the game's about. That's how you learn that. So the runtime direction seems like a really interesting thing to explore here. I would love to hear your experiences with them. Are there games where the facilitators take very active roles, or are a lot of the things that are happening here fire and forget?
It seems like it would be. This is another social contract thing. It seems like it would be very difficult to make a player in Second Life do something they don't want to. Like,
Well,
there's so much. Well, I think
you
it would be very difficult to like.
Well, but But on the other end, sorry, I'll wait for Celia.
I was just going to say though, I don't think that that kind of runtime direction is making someone do something they don't want to do. But I will say that having done a lot of role playing here, because of the instant messaging capability, you can do a lot of back channel direction. So if we sometimes will reenact. Every year we reenact the May 1st riots in Berlin in 1929, and there's usually a back channel going on where people are telling each other, "Oh, been a bomb thrown over here," which isn't in character, but it's a way for people to know where to go and where action is happening in the space. So I think there's that. And the other thing that's really unique here is that you have persistence. So people that do role playing in here, it's much more campaigny than instancy. So there you have a situation where you might have a narrative that plays out over long periods of time and characters. I mean, my character in 1920s Berlin is 9 years old. So,
Why do you think it's more persistent? That's interesting to me.
well, I don't know of a LARP that I've played where I've had a character that's evolved over 10 years.
Right, you don't usually have a space or
Well,
a group for that
some
long.
people do have those, right? There are tabletop campaigns.
Yeah, there are.
But it's
There are LARPs that have gone for 10 years too, but
yeah, no, I'm aware of that, but I think it's more common here because of its being an online space. It's easier for people to develop a persistent character over time. So that might be, and it's also you're also able to do some advanced planning in the same way that you can in regular.
On the other end, as we were saying earlier, there are a lot of spaces where, as long as you're following the rules, you generally do whatever you want to do. And I think even like Celia, in Berlin, when you're not doing recreations and you're not doing events, you're just there hanging out with people, being your character, correct?
Exactly.
I was trying to point toward though, like in LARPs like these though, are you directed by somebody else? To what extent? Like I feel like Second Life, the nature of the platform itself is kind of like this proto-tech libertarian space where it would be very difficult. I feel like people are contrarian and that it would be very difficult to really over direct or over produce another individual in kind of a game setting without receiving some sort of pushback. Do you think
Just,
that's
just to be clear, the sort of tip we're talking about and the direction, it's all consensual. You know going into the game that there's going to be someone actively adjusting your experience that you play. So there's nothing non-consensual if
right?
there was anything
Yeah, it's a. Oh,
I
sorry.
want to ask a question relating back to this particular. What do you call each of these things? Levers or whatever?
Like a soundboard.
It seems like, I guess my question has to do with direct and indirect direction, if that makes sense. So, like, I was talking about the Berlin riots, right? There are events that are, in the same way that you DM something, right? That are sort of triggered or scripted. But then the reaction that people have to them is spontaneous. So that's a different kind of direction. I was just wondering about if that is part of this slider or if there's a different one for that.
I would say that is part of this slider. There's stuff like, in campaign LARPs, people can put the characters, like non-player characters. I think you
It's
could
okay.
take the form of other avatars here in Second Life, but they can also plan for events to happen at certain times. And there's kind of a continuum of more subtle ways to affect the action. which might be through, you know, revealing secrets in envelopes to characters or something like that. So it kind of runs the gamut from like utterly not invasive at all. You know, what you see is what you get, and time is time, to the very invasive, where you are telling people to stand in a slightly different way to capture emotion,
Okay,
You're
so
compressing time.
Lizzie, all of that for sure exists in here. Not only are there some RP settings with actual NPCs, animated avatars that are scripted when you talk to them, and you may even end up with a menu, and so now it's like full video games where it's scripted and talking to you based on context menu. But there are even experiences collaborative groups have created, and I'm thinking again about Mad Peas, particularly Nightmare in New Orleans. It's an experience that they created that actually starts to venture all the way into point and click adventure game, where it's almost a LARP, except it is almost fully on rails and fully directed by the creators to the point that it's now indistinguishable from like adventure game.
It's so interesting. I want to point out that there are two other sliders that are relevant here. One of them is thematic representation, which is abstraction, simulation, and also as a lever for direction, pressure on players, whether it's hardcore or pretext. So we can talk about those as well. And I think that there's things that both of the way those sliders are calibrated impact the things we were just talking about. Do you want to talk about representation theme, Lizzie?
Sure. Let's see. Representation theme. Yeah. Okay. So it runs from abstract to simulation. So this is really a question of how you are using the setting in the game fiction. So are you trying to create something that feels really real and that is true to, for example, the historic period? Or are you trying to use abstract elements to drill down on a feeling that you're trying to evoke in your participants? So, for example, I mean, the example they give in the paper based on this is about whether you are trying to simulate an actual prison camp, like whether you bring participants into a setting that looks like a prison camp and you treat them like prisoners and so on, or whether you're maybe just maybe you're using like symbolic items to try to create the feeling of being in a prison camp.
And if your goal is to create that feeling, it might actually be more effective to abstract it rather than simulate it, because you could make somebody cold, you could make somebody distressed in a much more controlled environment than a hyper-realistic prison camp, for example.
And I think you could also exaggerate the emotions, like with something like White Death, right? Where a lot of it's abstract, but it's also like very exaggerated in terms of the feelings that you're having and the way that the light is manipulated and so forth, which is what theater does, right?
And that actually gets at another fader that I think is pretty interesting here, which is it's the physicality fader. So this is it's it's communication style, physical to verbal. So in a lot of LARPs are very talky. We're talking heads. We're having a board meeting. But then a LARP like White Death is both very abstract and it's very physical. So in that game, there's no language. Make meaningful words or phrases.
Sorry.
And the characters. This is a LARP by Nina Rune Essenbrook and Simone Steen Hansen, and it's a black box LARP with lighting. It's about a group of people who go up into the mountains to find a better life, but instead winter comes and they all become transparent. And whether the transparent ones are death or angels or the spirit of the winter is sort of left up for grabs. But the way you get your character in that LARP is you get a physical restriction. So when I played, I don't even think I can do it for you here as my avatar. Maybe I could if I knew better, but my character in that was to have my fingers always pointed at the ground and my head lolling to one side, but never in the middle.
And I had my elbows connected to my knees when I played it. So you can see the really extreme restrictions on how you can move.
And this creates a bodily feeling of constraint in the participants, and that constraint is lifted from them when they become transparent ones. So there's this like very physical transformation.
I
so
think
that's an example of communication style, really dialed up on the physical fader.
I mean, it's an interesting question about physical here because with something like that, I mean, technically you could make a HUD animation that would force you to move in a certain way.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a buildering thing conceptually, but you are able to do anything that you have in your inventory. So the animations that you have at your disposal that other people can see, you have to possess in some way. And conceivably, you could. Thanks, Janet.
Thanks for coming.
Janet.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Janet.
Conceivably, you could have your avatar sort of marking themselves or communicating in this way, doing any of these things. But you have to, this is so strange, but you have to have them in inventory and essentially be bearing them.
But you,
And
Jen, that's not entirely true because, like, we could go over to the dance floor right now and dance off your dance ball, and we wouldn't have.
if there is an animation giver, such as on the dance floor, then it can take over your animations for you. That's true.
And these benches do that as well. So you could.
Right. In that case, the animations are loaded inside of the object itself, and that's how a lot of people, quote unquote, do things in Second Life. The interacting with and animating your own avatar, it's an object interaction where the platform interprets it as you sitting on the thing in order to interact with it.
So when, with using White Death as an example of thematic abstraction, the thing about the game that's so moving and powerful as a player is that you spend about an hour with these really brutal constraints, and then you're told to forget them, and that you have bodily autonomy again, and it's absolutely liberating and transformative and very emotional. And I don't know how I can understand how you could procedurally translate those movements, but I don't know how you translate that emotional transformation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Having played it, I feel like, I mean, I have done animations that have basically been bestowed upon me by an animation machine, like a dance machine or even a sex machine. But the feeling of the connection between the emotions and the gestures, which obviously that's kind of Nina's signature style, right? Is the physical movement. That's the emotional content.
Well,
I will say, oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say it sort of speaks to what the essence of LARP is, and like thinking about LARP in Second Life. In LARP in Meat Space, your body is your character, And in Second Life, there's not so much we can do to our need-space bodies. So there's something, there's, so it almost takes on a different quality of meaning in Second Life. You're not going to get the epiphany of having a real physical restriction suddenly removed from your character, but you can. But and I don't quite know what the effect of changing your character's physicality is. Yeah.
Actually, now that we're talking about this, I'm almost certain that such a thing exists. There is, there's a Dom subculture in Second Life. So there's almost certainly a way to consensually script a HUD where one person does actually have some sort of control over another person's actions. You'll notice that when you're animated, you're sort of frozen in place, and unless you stand, the animation is kind of in control of your avatar's actions. And I'm almost positive that something like this exists that can hold somebody in place consensually with like a HUD and someone else in charge of it. I mean, if you can think of it, it exists.
Okay. All right.